Dyma ni. Okay then, so do you mind just telling us a bit about your background then?
I used when I left school, I went to art college. Went to Chester for a year to do a foundation. Then I went to Loughborough College of Art and Design, did a degree in fine art painting. Then once leaving college, ended up doing lots of different jobs. Really working as I worked as a graphic artist. Then I worked as a council labourer, hospital porter, and then had the idea of perhaps going into art therapy. And at the time, you needed to have 6 months' experience of working in a care setting. So, as I was aware of Bryn and Ayr Hospital, and that there was some nurse training going on there, I applied to do nurse training with the idea of doing it for 6 months or so, and then trying to apply to do art therapy. But once I started working in Bryn and Ayr, I sort of got sucked into it, I suppose. And although it was demanding, I enjoyed being with the people. And I ended up being in the service for 30 years. And I worked in the Bryn and Ayr Hospital from 1986 to the year 2000, before my job changed and I worked in a different part of the service.
Diolch. So, what made you start painting then?
Well, all the way through my whilst I was nursing, I was still doing commissions for people, just doing little projects here and there, but not sort of painting seriously. But I was always sort of mindful of the sort of artistic background that I had when I was working as a nurse, and I'd see scenes at the hospital, if you like, that would sort of make me think of sort of paintings. So I remember a time having helped a gentleman have a bath, and some of the bathrooms in Bryn and Ayr were the large sort of institutional sort of white tiled build rooms with sometimes 2 baths in the same room, as they had sort of, that's how they'd been designed. And examination couches were usually in the big bathrooms, so I'd help the gentleman onto the examination couch, and I was just aware that it just, to me, just felt like the composition of a Francis Bacon painting. All the sort of cold, sort of square tiles gave it a sort of structure behind it, and there was some sort of fleshy object, I suppose, for want of a better description, because the gentleman that I was helping, his body was quite deformed. He had sort of quite a scoliosis in his back, so it was his body was quite misshapen, really. So it just reminded me of a Francis Bacon painting. And quite often things would happen in my work life that would just make me think about. So I started storing these visual memories, I think. And then towards the end of my career, I was getting more aware of, I was wanting to get back into my painting. I was going to be retiring, because I was lucky enough to be retiring early. So I started thinking about developing paintings based on what my experience at the hospital. I'd taken photographs at the early part of my career, sort of portraits of some of the people, because a lot of the people there didn't have any sort of record of themselves. Those that were lucky enough to have their own rooms wouldn't have a picture usually in their rooms, not certainly in the place I worked. So I took the camera to work one day and took some photographs of some of the people, and then it was at the time when you could get 2 prints for the price of 1, sort of postal bonus print thing. So I sent off, got the prints, and then put prints in frames for the people in their bedrooms, so they'd have something of themselves in their rooms, something more personalised. And then I've just kept the other photos. I didn't really think about them until years later, really. Then I remembered, as I was thinking about developing a collection of paintings, that I could use them as reference points. So that's what I did, really. And so a lot of paintings here are based on some of the photographs that I had at the time, or sort of very strong visual memories.
So, which painting was the first one then that you did?
I think the first major one was the one of Joseph Roy Bevans that's in the National Library of Wales. Joe was a sort of real character in the hospital, and he became sort of known as an everyman figure for the hospital, really, because Joe was one of the few people that ventured out of the grounds of the hospital on his own. He used to go up into the village of Llanfechan and loiter, I suppose, by the traffic lights there. So the local community got to know him very well. And he just became a real character. So I, as he was so well known, I wanted to sort of test myself as a portrait artist, really. Prior to painting Joe, I'd tried to paint one of my friends who's a Welsh actor called Ian Williams, because I thought his face is quite well known in Wales. So I thought if I try and paint his portrait first, I can show it to people and see what they think, just to get a reaction. Because I'm still, well, I think I'm always insecure about my art, but I was, at that point especially, I was quite insecure about whether I was able to paint, really. So I did the paint of Leon, and it's got good feedback about that. So I thought I'd have a go at doing Joe. I think Joe was quite a difficult portrait to paint in terms of it. His features were very strange for a lot of, or unusual for want of a better word. Very big ears, huge forehead, big chin, one eye, and to try and capture a person with features such as that and make it look dignified, or make him look dignified and have some sort of integrity was a challenge. So I did that one over about a period of 3 months, and I had good feedback on it, so I'm trusting people that it is a strong portrait. A friend of mine who's an artist had seen it, Will, who's sadly no longer with us, has portraits in the National Library of Wales collection, and he'd asked them to have a look at it, and they approached me to say that they'd like it as part of their collection. So I was quite pleased that somebody who had Joe's status in society ended up in the national collection.
So you wrote something on the back of the portraits as well?
Yeah, Joe used to shout all sorts of slogans, and he was quite a mischievous character. I think he shouted up the Irish, "You Welsh get," and all different expletives. So I thought, as a little tribute to him, I wrote "You Welsh get" on the back of the canvas. I mean, not many people will get to see that ever, probably, but I know it's there, and hopefully Joe knows it's there. So it was just like a little tribute to his mischievousness, really.
Very fitting. So it was acrylic that you used to paint?
Acrylic, yeah. I had started just using oils, but I was struggling to use oil, really. And I like to try and work quickly. So when I started using acrylic, I found it was obviously drying quicker. It was easier to change things more quickly, and it was a bit more life to it than using the oils was a bit too dark, I think. So that, yeah, acrylic suited the way I was painting at that time. More lately I've been using oils more and more, so I'm getting more used to using oils and more comfortable with using oil, but I'll be experimenting with all sorts of media, really, and seeing where it takes me. But that's certainly what the acrylic, I think, that I used, that worked very well.
It's just beautiful colours, isn't it?
Thank you. There's a painting called Het a Scarf. It's about hat and scarf.
So the title, is it Het a Scarf?
Het a Scarf.
The English is just, there's a translation, it's not a title?
No, it's Het a Scarf. That's the title I gave it.
Right.
Because to me it's just Het a Scarf.
So who's the portrait?
This is a gentleman called David, who I worked with, who's lived at Bryn Neirth for a long time, but I think he's lived in a lot of other places before getting to Bryn Neirth. He's one of these gentlemen. He had a lot of quite acute physical health issues. He used to always wear a hat and a scarf, but especially his hat. He'd wear his hat to bed. He'd wear it in the bath. Very few people got to see his eyes. I mean, I saw his eyes a few times, and they were beautiful, piercing blue eyes, and they were always hidden by the rim of his hat. So this is actually an oil painting. This is the first one that I felt happy with when I got back into painting. It felt that I'd worked well with the oils, and I ended up with an image that I was happy with. So I kept that painting and just kept it in the studio for a while, really. Did it in 2018, but I think in about 2020 I'd gone off camping to Penllyn like I do every summer, and I just happened to find an old wooden frame in a hedge by Uwchmynydd, I think it was. Anelog, sorry, yeah. And it was all this weather-beaten old wooden frame. I don't know how old it was, but it was beaten, it was weathered, there was no varnish on it, hardly. So I just took it home because I thought, this is a lovely looking frame, I might be able to use this. And then I took it to the studio, and then I just looking around the studio, and I tried to fit the portrait of David into and it fitted perfectly. And I thought it fitted in another way as well. It was just emotionally, it just felt correct that this sort of old weather-beaten frame was encompassing this old man who had also been weathered by time and circumstances as well. So I don't know what's the word, serendipities, I don't know. But they seemed to come together, and it felt right that they were both together. They both seemed to complement each other in some sort of visual way or emotional way for me.
Both.
Yeah.
So, what was David's background then? Do you know?
He was originally from the northwest of England, and say all sorts of physical health issues. No family contact as far as I was aware. Lived in Brunei for many years. As far as he passed away some years ago.
It's supposed to be in there. That was his family then.
Yeah, I think that went for a lot of the people that were there. That the staff were their family. You know. Yeah. It was certainly a community. For all its faults, and obviously a big institution. It definitely was a community, and there was all of life was there. It wasn't just all grim institutional practices. There was a lot of laughter there. There was a lot of humour. There was a lot of love there, I think, as well.
That comes through in the portraits.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. This is Panad.
Have a panad as well.
Yeah, I'll have a slur. Like Brunei was a sort of part of a hospital system, I suppose, and it was an institution. And panad is the Welsh word for a cup of tea, local word for a cup of tea. And things like cups of tea and cigarettes became a sort of currency, I suppose, as they do in institutions everywhere. And people sort of barter for cups of tea, cigarettes. Sorry.
Funny. Cyn damser ma'n iawn.
Yeah, sorry. Panad was an important thing. So I was painting a gentleman called Henry. I had a few photographs of him holding his panad, and Henry was a particularly sort of mischievous character. But I would also often come up to staff and ask them, he'd do them a favour. I'll have a bath, I'll wash my hands if you give me a cup of tea. You give me a fag, I'll go for a bath. I'll behave if you give me a cup. And that was the sort of dialogue that went on. So I thought I'd just try to capture a person cradling the cup of tea, which was so important in the hospital system. Like another cultural reference point for me was that there's like an orange yellowy chair that he's sitting in. I was mindful of the sort of Van Gogh. Not that I'm comparing myself to Van Gogh at all. It was just I've always loved his paintings of the chairs in the rooms, and I tried to use that as a little framework for Henry sitting in his chair, drinking his cup of tea.
It works really well. Yeah, I love the colours there as well.
That's the serving hatch at the side of the thing where the food used to be served. Painting called Holding the Stones, oil and paper. A gentleman called David who used to spend a lot of his days out in the hospital grounds, scudding about under the trees and sort of playing with different things, stones, picking up stones, bits of wood, pretending that these things were they could be doing anything from a bow and arrow to a gun to whatever. And he used to spend all his day out there, come back late at night, and he used to be covered in dirt. And he used to be a happy soul that used to be out playing with things. And in this painting, he's holding a stone. And it's just, I was like looking at the idea of how people, some things are important to some people, they've got great significance, but they mean nothing to somebody else. And to Dave, like he'd pick up a stone, and that would be the most important thing in his life for that moment. But to somebody else, it'd be a dirty old stone. So it's just that thing about respecting people, people's individual needs, I suppose, in a way, in some sort of way. I tried to capture his sort of quiet dignity when he's sitting there, because he was seen as a bit of a clownish character, but I wanted him to be seen as more than that, as sort of a human being with things that he loved doing.
He does look really dignified there.
I think, yeah, I hope so. Again, that's the one of the challenge when people have got features of their faces that are not, what's the word, mainstream, what people usually accept as being acceptable, I suppose, is the word in society generally. It's trying to portray them as human beings, dignified human beings with integrity, which I hope the paintings are all trying to do.
It's down to the eyes again, isn't it? The eye.
Yeah, I think the eyes are so important in any portrait, really, because obviously, by definition, if there's a portrait on a wall, you have to look at it and inevitably drawn to the eyes, and I think the eyes are so important. Windows to the soul, they say, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's holding a stone.
You've captured him there, haven't you?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's one of the ones I'm particularly content with. I never say happy because I'm never happy, because that's why I keep doing it, because it's a process that I think that's important.
So from your point of view, you're saying about the process. Why, emotionally, how did you feel about painting? And
very emotional. It's been a cathartic thing for me in a lot of ways, I think. And in a way, I think it might sound odd, I wasn't concerned about what the end product would be, in a way. It's just a process I need to go through. And I'm still going through it, really. And I probably will for a long time, because it had such an emotional impact on me working in the hospital and working with people, people that were sort of devalued and labelled and demonised, I suppose, traditionally. It's trying to see beyond labels and seeing the people there.
As people,
yeah. And that's what all this work is about, really. It's about seeing people as people. Because I was saying to somebody, when you put art on a wall, people are forced to look at it, and these are people were never looked at properly by society. They were sort of labelled and put away. So I think it's important that art reflects society and everybody in society, really, and as human beings. So I suppose it's my way of doing that, really. So yeah. Yeah, this is Eric, who used to come into sort of the day service department a lot. I didn't know him particularly well, but he was a bit of a character. Very able man. A lot of people that were in Brunei, very able, and sometimes you were thinking, well, why were these people in a hospital? And then actually it came to light a lot of people were there because they were sort of deemed as being morally defective at some point in the past, and people that might not have been as intellectually sort of able as others were sort of sent into a system. There was one particular lady, not related to Eric here, but a person that suffered because of that was a lady that had a baby when she was quite young, and as she was sort of a lady that occasionally made some like unwise decisions in her life, she was labelled as being morally defective and had to enter the hospital system, and her baby was taken away from her, a young boy, and following that she had a horrendous episode of postnatal depression, spent all her life, or most of her life in the hospital. She did leave eventually. I spent a lot of that time in periods of sort of quite dark sort of mental illness, and she would walk around the hospital with a doll, which we obviously assumed was her substitute for the baby she lost. So that was a sort of an image that I have painted in the past and shown in an exhibition, but I destroyed that particular painting afterwards, and then it's a topic that I'm going back to in the sort of new work that I'm doing. But very sort of powerful image of cruelty, really, to people, and how systems can treat people who get labelled.
I can't imagine it. Poor winner. So just digressing a bit, I mean, all of these now are in the National Collection, be it in the National Library or with us.
Yeah.
So how does that make you feel?
I'm happy that they're potentially going to be seen within the context of other art, because I'm not really aware of notable artists or artists that have painted portraits of people with learning disabilities or people that have been in institutions such as this. I mean, I'm aware of stuff, people like Hogarth painted or did his engravings of Bedlam, and I think Goya painted people with sort of possibly mental health issues. But it's not the sort of subject that's been portrayed popular in a sort of widespread way in the art world, as far as I can see. I mean, it's important that art reflects society in my view, and it's quite interesting that people with learning disabilities, people in hospital like this, don't have a place. So to know that some of my paintings are in a collection with other more serious paintings, perhaps that's hopefully a good thing. And it keeps awareness of a population, a forgotten population of people going.
How do you think they'd feel knowing?
I couldn't. That's hard to speculate. Probably wouldn't care at all. But that's not the important thing to do.
So what do you hope that people get out of seeing these portraits then?
I think if people look at them and understand the context in which they were painted, that they see that these are just people. Simple as that. Yeah. Dignified people, hopefully people with feelings, people with integrity. That's it. Nothing more than that, really. I don't know what more you could ask for, really.
That's important.
Because that's all people, well, lots of us were trying to do, and that was to make people just recognised as people. That was, sadly, that was the job. It's trying to treat people as people, treat people with respect, whatever their needs, trying to meet their needs, find out what their needs were, trying to meet them. And everybody's different.
Yeah.